Whenever we pick up where we left off with something, we like to see things as we left them. But when picking up where we left off means reopening a folder on our Mac, we might shrug off that desire to see things as we left them simply because we don't understand how Finder windows are wired. Folders set to consistently open in the same unified view allows you to find what you need in a flash. It's in and out and you're quickly back to your work. And conversely, folders with random view settings seem to open erratically, which is very jarring to the eye. This forces you to reorient yourself from one different looking folder to the next, and this uses brain power that's better used elsewhere. It's easy enough to shrug off these micro interruptions and just get on with your work. But if these tiny little time sucks are ongoing, they can add up to large blocks of wasted time. And so what follows might be compared to the tedium of organizing your closets and junk drawers. But just like those tasks, efficiency and satisfaction are the end results here.
Let me ask you a question. This has been driving me crazy. What does this light switch do?
Oh, nothing.
Did it drive you crazy to have a switch and not know what it did?
I know what it did. Nothing.
They wouldn't have put it there if it didn't do something. How can you not care?
Like this.
As we start in on losing visuals that are jarring to the eye, let's also lose a bit of visual noise. To do that, I'm going into the System Preferences panel and coming to the Desktop and Screensaver section. And in here, I'm going to forego our beautiful Catalina image for a neutral gray, and I'll do that by selecting this color wheel down here, and then selecting this Custom Color button, which calls up the macOS color picker. And then in the color picker, I'm going to move this slider over to our neutral gray. And while I have this color picker open, note here inside of the Desktop and Screensaver settings, this panel is constrained in size. You'll be seeing this again very shortly, but here just note the size constraints. So we're all set in System Preferences. I'm shutting that down. And now I'm going to lose the dock because our focus is to find a window, and currently the dock's just added visual noise. So as we've done before, I'm pressing Command Option D to hide that. I'll also lose these desktop icons. And you may recall in the last video that my new Find a Window Show setting was set to my home directory. For this demo, I'm going to change that to my Documents window. So when I press Command N, we're set to Documents. And we're all set. Let's get started. More than once, mention was made about the View Options panel as being contextual. And the best way to put these two top switches into context is to review some key points that have been made about Finder windows. From the first video and on, we've seen these different folder locations in the Go menu swap in and out of view in the same Finder window. And if a Finder window isn't already open, these folders will open a new window for themselves. We'll need them to do just that in this demo. And when a particular folder does open a window for itself, the size and position of that newly opened window will be identical to the last window that was opened for that particular folder. That newly opened Windows view settings will also be the same as when last opened as seen here. The window closes in List and reopens in List, closes in Icon, reopens in Icon, and so on. And this holds true under one condition. And that condition is that no other view is set elsewhere between the time in which this window is closed and reopened. And so to prove that point, I'm coming back to List View. I'm coming over to my home directory and I'm going to reset Icon View is the latest set view. Now when I close Documents, Command W and reopen, we're at Icon View. To repeat that, we're going to reset my desktop folder as Columns View, latest view. Close Documents, Command W, reopen, Command N, we're in Columns View. And to repeat, resetting iCloud Drive to Gallery, closing Documents, reopening Documents, And so the takeaway here is that the last view to be set, no matter where it was set, is the view that's going to be used in the next window that opens. And that's where these view options panel switches come into play, which are unchecked by default. You can see here by the lit up buttons that Documents is in focus. That box is unchecked. Coming over to my home directory, unchecked. Desktop, unchecked. iCloud Drive, unchecked. And were I to create any new folders, which I'll do in my Documents folder, creating a subfolder by pressing Command-Shift-N. When I open that, again, we're unchecked. So that's the default, and that's important to know. I'm going to come back to Documents, Command-Shift-O. I'm going to first delete that folder, don't want it. And this list view is my preferred view for documents. So I'm going to set that here. I'm going to lock that into place. And now, as we had done before over here, I'm going to reset my home directory. That's the latest set view, icon view. So when I close my Documents window, this should kick in and this should remain in list view. So let's check that out. Command W, Command N, and we're in list view. Now that sticks to the Documents folder, but not necessarily the subfolders. So let's see what happens when we open those. Again, last view set was icon view, and so we're in icon view. I'm going to come back to Documents, Command-Shift-O. I'm going to come down to my iCloud Drive, and let's reset Gallery View as the latest view setting. I'm going to close Documents, reopen, and let's open another one. We'll reopen that to Admin. Now we're in Gallery View. I'm going to come back to Documents using Command-Shift-O. And by the way, I'm using Command-Shift-O to get back to Documents. Right after this demo, we're going to be talking about another hotkey that's much more efficient. So anyway, until then, Command-Shift-O, back to Documents. And let's try another subfolder. I'm going to go to these charts here. And the same thing, I've got the Gallery View. So let's say that I want to keep these charts in Gallery. Let's lock this into place for that subfolder. I'm coming back to Documents, Command-Shift-O. And now I'm going to check this Browse in List View checkbox. And what that should do is now all of the folders in here, when I open them within Documents, should be subordinate to this Open in List View. So let's reopen that to Admin that we just last saw in Icon View and then Gallery View. And now we're in List View. I'm coming back to Documents, Command-Shift-O, and let's open up that Charts folder again, which I locked into Gallery View. And so you can see how these checkboxes work. And so now, as mentioned, I've been doing a lot of Command-Shift-O to get to Documents. We're next going to have a little talk about this Enclosing folder hotkey command. And then when we get into Icon View, we're going to talk about that macOS color picker that we introduced when we set the background of our desktop.
Oh my God, look at this! Okay, but there is a wire back there. I mean, that switch is connected to something.
I'm pressing the Command-Shift-N keys to create a new folder on my desktop. And I'm doing so to demonstrate how useful this Enclosing folder hotkey command is. And to do that, I need to create some subfolders, Russian doll style, nested. So inside of my desktop folder, I'm pressing Command-Shift-N again. And I'm going to open that one. Command-Shift-N again. And so on. And we'll stop at 4. Okay, so having done that, you can see that I'm in folder 3, looking at folder 4. So when I press that Enclosing folder, you'll see we jump up into 2. And now I'm going to use the hotkey rather than the pull down. I'm pressing the Command up arrow. I'm into 1. And eventually I'm up on my desktop folder looking at 1. So it's pretty straightforward here, but I'm going to go over to Columns View. and expand the window to show our little hierarchy here. And then again, clear enough, but let's just drive this home with the path bar. So I'm going to call up the window path bar by pressing Command Option P. And again, you can see this little string breadcrumb trail all the way back to our hard drive. So you can see that I've got 4 highlighted. As I press the Command Up arrow, I'm going to be jumping, as we just did. And as I jump from out of folder to folder, you'll see this path get shorter down here. And if I keep going, I hit a dead end, which is my drive. I can go no further. And you cannot go back from whence you came with any kind of a toggle to go in the opposite direction. To do that, you would have to rely on your well-planned sidebar shortcuts. And that's a non-issue in this instance because we're right here on the desktop. So practical application of using this, I'm going to go into gallery view and I'm going to a gallery. And here you can see several subfolders. So I'm using my right left arrow keys. I can toggle across to see the different folders here. So were I to use the combination of the arrow keys and that enclosing folder command, what I can do, I'll just either double click or Command O to open that folder. And I can use my arrow keys to rifle through the gallery. When I hit the end of the line with that gallery, I use my enclosing folder hotkey command, Command Up, to get back. And then I can move on into another image gallery, were this to be an image gallery. So just a quick and simple demo. It's just really handy when you're rifling through your Finder windows to know that command. And same applies to were you to be working in list view. You wanted to check out the links in here, and then you wanted to get back to your main folder, same thing. With our desktop folder open and in focus, let's open up the View Options panel and set a few options. So I'm pressing Command J to do so. And as I go down to look at that button that lets us set options, it's nowhere to be seen. And the reason being is we're in column view. And in columns view, what you see is what you get. And if I were to toggle to the other views, you would see that that button would make an appearance. So here's gallery view, icon view, and list view. Now as I toggle through these other 3 views, note how the button is dimmed. And the reason for that is because nothing has been changed here in these particular view options. So the minute I make a change, that senses a change in the air and it lights up. And it's lighting up asking you, hey, do you want to set this new default? And if you opt not to, you can just revert back to what was, and it's going to dim back to that last default that was set. One thing to note here is that we're in gallery view, and in gallery view you're just one radio click away from snapping back to your established default. But were we in another view, let's go to icon view. I'm pressing Command 1. We have our set default here, and were I to start sliding these sliders around, when we light up over here, if I wanted to revert back to that established default, I'd really have to fiddle around here to get that button dimmed. And I could, but it's annoying and not really worth my time. And so there's an easier way, and that is to press your Command Option keys down, and you'll see the Uses Defaults button toggle to Restore to Defaults. So when I click this Restore to Defaults, you should see these sliders snap back into place, like so. And while talking about defaults, it's important to discern the naming similarities between this default radio button and this Uses Defaults button. This default radio button is in context with these other 2 background options, using a color or using an image. So were you to alter this default view or a color view or a picture view and customize it a little bit further, as we've done before, so coming up to here with our folder 2, I'm making the icon size a little bit larger. And should I choose my default to appear like this with this alteration, then I set that as the default. So let's go a little bit further. Let's go into folder 3 and let's crank that one all the way up and say we want to set that as the default. So you can see I'm going to come back to 2. I'm pressing the command up. So 2 has been set as our new default. So I come back into 3. Let's say I set that as the default and then come back to 2 by pressing command up. You can see it's sort of a leapfrog type of a thing. So I'm going to come back to our desktop folder, going all the way back to the original just to make sure. And I know that that's what I want for default, so I'm going to establish, I'm going to reinstate our original size here. And now I'm going to rifle through these subfolders. 1's dim because we haven't changed that. When I come into 2, that should light up because we changed it, which we did. So I'm going to press the command option, knock that in line with our default, come up to 3, knock that in line with our default, and let's check out 4. I can't remember. Okay, so that's dim. So now as I return back to the home ship here, the mothership, these all should be dimmed, which is an indicator that they're all set to that default view, default setting. And we're back in the desktop folder. So having clarified the differences here as best I can, let's move on down to our second option, which is color. And note how our folder background matches up with this color block. And once I click this block, you'll see the color picker that I mentioned to you earlier when we set the background of our desktop. And I mentioned back then that this color picker was a little bit constrained in size. And here you can really get up in size to drag this cross here and really refine your color selections. And you've also got different means of creating colors up here. So as you can see, we have our gray folder lining and we have this little swatch here. So as I drag this crosshair around, you're going to see this large color well and the folder itself update lifetime. Let's just quickly create a couple of colors here that aren't too offensive. When I got something that I can live with, I will drag it into one of these color wells. And let's grab one more. Like so. You can also use this eyedropper to sample a color on an open image or a desktop or whatever. So maybe I made one that's really offensive and I dragged that to the color well. To remove something, and it looks like we've got more color wells than we know what to do with, but say you're running out of color wells and you want to bag the ugly colors, I'm going to call up my dock, Command Option D, and you simply drag that swatch into the trash and you're done with it. Now the nice thing about this macOS color picker is that you can apply these same colors. So if you've got a branded color system and you're doing maybe a balance sheet or a press release in Pages that you want to send out and you want that to match your graphs that you create in Numbers, or else you're giving a keynote presentation, all of these Mac iOS apps, including your email, can use these colors. They're at your disposal through this color picker. And it just so happens I have a couple of Mac iOS apps open on some other desktops. I'm going to swipe with my 2 fingers on my mouse. And on the second desktop, you can see that I have Pages up. And when I select this radio button, ordinarily it's not open. You've got this swatch here. And then I can call up the same color picker and I can update my documents and sync them all up this way. And now pushing that a little bit further, let's come over here. Same deal with Keynote. I can click this little wheel here, not open typically, click this, call it up, and then I can sync up my collateral. Now one thing here that's important to note is that this Mac OS color picker is only available on your Mac. It is not available on your iPad, on your iPhone, or if you were to log into your iCloud account and work on these Keynote, Pages, documents in your web browser, which you can do. That's another video. But just know that this macOS color picker is limited to your computer. So if you want to apply a color system to these documents, do so on your desktop before you work on them elsewhere. So again, let's get back on point with our point at hand, which is this setting of view options. And let's lose this color because it's really pretty bad. And as we move forward, I could certainly come up with some much better colors, but let's just move on. And in keeping, I'm done with trashing colors. I don't need the trash bin, and we're done with our iOS apps. So I'm going to lose the dock, and I'm also going to lose the color picker. We're done with that. Now we have this colorway set, and the button is asking us, hey, do you want to set this as the default? And let's say, yeah, sure. We'll go with this plum, and that's now the default. Now know that this is going forward. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to create a new folder, Command Shift N. Pretty much sums up that color. So when I open this, you can see that that default kicked in. So I'm going to use my hotkey command, Command up, get back. And when I open this, which was created way back when we created this folder in defaults view, when I open that, I should be able to expect this, which is the case. And as I move through, all of these folders that were created earlier in this are going to stay with that. And it's also saying, hey, this isn't the defaults. Do you want to change this back to the default? So it's kind of like this leapfrog thing. I'm going to come back to our main desktop here. Coming down to our last option, there's two key considerations to bear in mind when selecting a background image. The first thing to consider and avoid is to not choose an image that's too dark as to obscure these file and folder names. Interestingly, when we're in this default setting, starting off, macOS is smart enough to offset these file and folder names with white text against a dark background. But when you choose a dark custom image, it doesn't discern between a dark background and light type. You get black type on a dark background. And then the next consideration is to not choose an image that's too small. So to better explain these two considerations, I've got this chocolate cotton paper JPEG here. And it probably looks like a black square on video, but it's actually a pretty nice texture. So as I highlight this JPEG and then press the spacebar to preview it, you can see that it's a pretty good size. Nonetheless, when I drag it into this window here and choose it, you can see that my type turns black. So I cannot read it, and my tile is just too small for this folder. And in keeping with this obscured type, another thing you don't want to do, this texture down here at the bottom is sized accordingly. But bringing that in, it's just a little bit busy, and it's somewhat readable, but still a busy pattern is going to obscure the readability of your files and folder names. So the happy medium right here in the middle, again, we've got Goldilocks choosing the right bed. Right in the middle is our pink brush JPEG. And incidentally, these two files down here are sized identically to my 27-inch background images that I can select in my system preferences. So when I drag this guy in, you can see that it's sized appropriately and it doesn't obscure the readability of my file names. So when you make the right choices here, you can come up with some pretty cool skins for your folder linings that also might match up with your desktop background. For me personally, I just choose to go back to my default settings and concentrate on the contents of the folders themselves. In hopes of being helpful, I share my particular view option settings as a suggestion and per the premise of this video. I like to keep my home directory in icon view because these graphic macOS folders allow me to easily scan my file system's primary components. And the desktop itself already displays an icon view. So for an alternative view, I set my desktop Finder window to list view. And I choose list view because these columns allow me to sort and filter as I can in Microsoft Excel or maybe macOS numbers. And incidentally, these column options / sort options are identical to the ones found here in the pull down menu. They're just a lot easier to get to over here. And just a reminder, as mentioned in the previous video, you can add these different columns by checking these boxes or by right-clicking like so. But this is my default setup for my documents and all the document subfolders. This is my go-to setup. And here's a quick reminder as to why I would want a go-to default setup. My go-to default setup not only allows me to sort and filter with my particular column items of choice, but it also establishes a visual gestalt in that jumping from folder to folder, they don't budge. So you can see my line up here, jumping from documents back to desktop, still in place, coming into documents and then jumping into some subfolders. Your eye knows exactly where to go and you can scan so much quicker. Now, and so we're coming down the line here, things are lining up nicely, and then we come to a folder where our columns jump a little bit. A little bit jarring, but you can regroup enough, but why should you? Then you come down to another one, things jump around again, you come back to documents. So that in and of itself is visually jarring. But say you come down into different view options. From that back to this, to this, to the column view, to another background image, back to this. So I think you get my point. So whatever view options you choose for yourself, it really pays to make a decision and stick with it. It really speeds things up for you. And of course you can always toggle your buttons or use the command keys to toggle into a particular view. So I'm going to now whip these guys into shape. Coming down to Robinson's Wharf, the first thing I'm going to do is go back to my documents because I know that's my default view. And here's where our quirky little button comes in handy. I'm going to click Use as Defaults so I know that this is my default setup. Now I'm going to come down to our rogue folders. And now when I press the command option, you'll see these guys snap into place like so. Come down to the other rogue folder, command option and click. They line up nicely. And now for these other ones that are in different views, first we have to come here. I'm going to first get into list view, command 2, and then press command option, restore to defaults. They snap into line. And the same thing here. Going from columns to list view, command 2, I'm going to press the command option and get those guys to line up. And then finally, let's lose this background. First off, let's go to the default. We don't want this. And when we do go to a icon view, I don't really want to see that. So let's set this as the default for our icon view. And now let's go back to list view, command 2, and press, it looks like it's already in line, but let's make sure, command option, click, and we're all lined up. So nice. Going all the way through, we have our, again, visual gestalt. Quick and easy. Nice, easy scan. And now let's get back to the documents and let's talk about how it would actually work. We are not about to, while we're busy in the trenches, we're not going to stop what we're doing and open the view options panel to make sure that this button is dimmed or not dimmed and make sure we're in the right view setting. So let's just take that out of the equation. And the workaround here, I have 2 empty folders. I have 2 go-to list views, the one we're using right now, which is this folder template, my standard list. So if I open up this empty folder, you can see that this is my default setup. So rather than, again, opening view options and setting a default, all I have to do is highlight this folder, press Command D, hit return to rename it, if I can spell, and get on with it. I've got a new folder and it's in line. So the next thing, I have a second folder here I'll talk about in a moment, but to bring these to the top of the pile so I can see them, a little file naming trick. I'm hitting return to highlight again. And by the way, if you highlight and hit a return on a PC, you're actually going to open the folder or file. You're not going to highlight the naming field. So anyway, back on track here, I'm going to put an asterisk at the beginning of the file name. And same here, hit return, add an asterisk, and they stay put. But as soon as I hit sort by name, they'll come right to the top of the stack. So now while I'm in Documents, where most of my folders are typically created, I have right here at the very top 2 of my go-to setups that I just Command D, and I have a folder that I know is going to be aligned with all of this. It's quick and easy. And while on the topic of naming things, let's go to this folder here where I have a bunch of image links that are named by the chapters in this book. And let's just say that prior to this 00 section, another chapter came into play. What we can do is, rather than individually select each one of these and rename it, we can group select, and I'm holding on the Shift key. So selecting the top of the stack and then coming down to the bottom with my Shift key held, I can group select my files. And now with these multiple items selected, I can come to File and I can rename the number of items that I selected. So obviously we have 11 here. Were we to select more or less, that number would obviously change. So selecting that, I can come in here and say that I wanted to change this 00 dash to maybe 00-1, like a sub preface or something. And when I hit rename, you're going to see these ripple down with this new convention, like so. Now I've got to revert back because I don't want to mess up the links with this book. They're all linked by name, so I'm going to press the Command Z to go back to where we were. But that's a very helpful, especially you're looking at a long list. If you got any type of a lengthy list that has quite a few items to shuffle around by name, it's a powerful thing to know about. And again, different view options. Going back to our checking the box here, we have our subfolder locked into gallery view, so I can view it as we did before and use the up arrow to come back. And another way of viewing in list view, because this rundown of images is easier to pinpoint by name because they're so clearly named and labeled, it's easier to scan like this. When you see one you want to preview, you just hit the space bar and it pops right up. Finally, I'm going to press Command up to come back to my documents. And as we finally reach the end of this video, I'm going to quickly make mention of this second go-to default setup of mine, which is going to be featured in the next video on tags and aliases. If you like the idea of retrieving any and all files at breakneck speed, then please tune in. So in closing, and as you go forth, may you always see things as you last left them. And hopefully, I'll see you in the next video. As always, thanks for watching.